couple of little notes. A special hello to our newest member of the Bay Area broadcast legends, Gary Gilo. Gary, are you here? I can't see from the light. There he is. You may remember Mr. Gilo and a fellow named Gabbard, who brought FM stereo radio to the Bay Area for the first time, way back when. And I also want a special hello and welcome to, there are two tables here. And when I walked in, the little card on the table said Broads. And Broads in Broadcasting. Ladies, you're welcome, and you should join us and come every time. Believe it or not, there wasn't a whole lot of television 67 years ago. But folks sure listen to radio. News was the order of the day, and to present our news, we have a member of the Hall of Fame from KCBS, Mr. Stan Bunger, and joining Stan, a member of the Television Academy Silver Circle and a 40-year vet at Channel 7. Sans his famous mustache, which he surrendered in the name of charity. Mr. Don Sanchez, I find it interesting that you lost yours and Alex Trebek got his back. Gentlemen.
He glued mine on, you know.
Stole my line there, Cleveland. I didn't recognize this guy. You look 14 years old now.
I am 14 years old. Well, you look pretty good yourself. We'll go dancing later. I think you do that.
Good afternoon from the Broadcast Legends newsroom, and here are the latest headlines from 1947.
Wow. Internationally, Britain announced it will leave India and become an independent state by June of next year, 1948, and appointed Lord Louis Mountbatten as the last victor. Viceroy. I'm going to start this all over again, okay? I've been under the weather.
Well, here at home, President Harry S. Truman announced the Truman Doctrine, a plan to oppose communism throughout the world.
In June 1947, President Truman visited Ottawa, and in doing so became the first ever U.S. president to visit Canada.
Meanwhile, former General George Marshall outlined his plan to save Europe from its post-war slump with an economic adventure later to be called the Marshall Plan.
You sound just like you do on radio. And almost without notice, President Truman set up another government entity that would create quite a stir years later. It was a little outfit called the Central Intelligence Agency.
Congress was busy in 1947, and before its summer recess, passed the Taft-Hartley Act over Truman's veto. The act included a ban on the use of union funds for political purposes and did away with the so-called closed shop.
2 years after the war ended, the White House appealed to all Americans to aid Europeans by giving up meat on Tuesdays and poultry and eggs on Thursdays.
The science guys were busy this year. Edward Land invented the Polaroid Land camera. Perhaps a more useful invention occurred when a scientist walked past a radar antenna and it melted a chocolate bar in his pocket. The microwave oven.
The first tubeless car tire appeared in 1947, but of more importance to this audience anyway, it was the year that 3 Bell Telephone Lab employees discovered a way to move electrons through crystals rather than vacuums. And they came up with the transistor. Thanks, guys.
Things that fly through the air made news in 1947, including the Bell X-1 rocket. The rocket plane became the first aircraft to fly faster than the speed of sound when it exceeded Mach 1. The pilot, a U.S. Air Force captain called Charles Yeager. Most people just called him Chuck.
A month after that, there was another aeronautical event of history and importance in California when Howard Hughes got behind the controls of the Spruce Goose for a maiden flight. It lasted just 8 minutes. It never flew again.
And then there was that incident of, quote, an experimental weather balloon, unquote, that crashed in the desert southwest. Debris from the crash included sensors and thin metal radar reflectors, leading many of the public to conclude a flying saucer had crashed at Roswell Air Force Base.
Now, all of you who actually believe that, please move to this side of the room. All right. And it was actually 47 years later, in 1994, when the Air Force did acknowledge it was a spy balloon meant to detect nuclear blasts elsewhere in the world.
Well, on Broadway, there were 2 interesting startups. First, the Actors Studio was founded by Elia Kazan to propagate the method style of introspective acting. And the American Theater Wing established the Antoinette Perry Award that became better known as the Tonys.
Meanwhile, on the Great White Way, audiences were applauding Arthur Miller's All My Sons, John Van Bruten's The Voice of the Turtle, and Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. The hot musicals in 1947 were Brigadoon and Finian's Rainbow.
You went to the movies this year. The films you saw at your favorite neighborhood theater, when there were favorite neighborhood theaters, included
Gregory Peck and John Garfield in Gentleman's Agreement. Rosalind Russell and Raymond Massey starred in Morning Becomes Electra.
There were the big hits of 1947, Miracle on 34th Street, Great Expectations, and The Bishop's Wife. The Oscar went to... anyone? 1947, the Oscar?
Dark Passage.
You're all wrong. It was the best years of our lives.
Readers will remember it was readers, anybody still read? It was 1947 when James Michener emerged as a major American writer when he received the Pulitzer Prize for Tales of the South Pacific. Bestsellers included The Wayward Bus by John Steinbeck and a memorable little paperback by Nicky Spillane entitled I, the Jury.
Yeah. Speaking of reading, in a mountain cave in Jordan, a goat herder stumbled on something quite important. We came to call them the Dead Sea Scrolls.
In sports, 1947 was the year a young man named Jack Roosevelt Robinson broke the racial barrier in Major League Baseball when he signed to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Well, the World Series failed to provide a fairy tale ending when the New York Yankees defeated the Dodgers 4-3.
And finally, people born in 1947 include Nolan Ryan, Farrah Fawcett, Dan Quayle, Edward James Olmos, Rob Reiner, Billy Crystal, Glenn Close, Elton John, David Letterman, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Salman Rushdie, O.J. Simpson, and Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Also, Jim Vargas, Stephen King, Kevin Kline, Richard Dreyfuss, Tom Deschel, Carlton Fisk, Tom Clancy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you were born in 1947, the Bay Area Broadcast Legends wishes you a very happy birthday.
Broadcast news headlines are written, produced, and directed by Jim Schock and will not be repeated anytime or any place.
I think he's leaving the room. Because they go right from here, right here, to the shredder in the other room. There we go, yes.
Until next time, I'm Stan Bungard.
I'm Don Sanchez.
And we return now to our regularly scheduled, non-shreddable program. Thank you, Don.
And your lunch has arrived, Stan, for you. Thank you. Okay. Time to get things started, and to do that, I'm pleased to present from the Bay Area Radio Museum, Mr. Len Shapiro, to introduce our acting panel.
Well, welcome everybody to the 2014 Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame induction luncheon. Today we're going to add 9 members to the already group of 146 previously inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's good to see quite a few of them here today. Dan Rusanowski, Hank Greenwald especially. And I'd also like to thank at this time the CHRS. They've done a heck of a job. It's hard to believe they raised $1 million+ to buy that building in Alameda and convert it into the Bay Area Radio Museum, CHRS headquarters, and of course our Wall of Fame. So eventually, when we get it all finished and the remodeling is done, you'll all be invited to come out and see the Wall of Fame plaques there. And also we have updated our Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame website and museum site, which you can see over there, and we'll hope that you will visit that. Also, the fact is we had 3,000 votes this year, more than 3,000 votes for the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. That includes internet, paper ballots, and mail-in. So that's probably our best ever that we've ever received for the nominations. Some quick notes about the Bay Area Radio Museum. We're always looking for donations of material that we can use and set up in the future. This year we received 150 transcription records from 1940s and 50s from the estate of Dave Tonelli, plus numerous electrical parts. We've also received from Roy Story some KLX tapes from the 1950s and also some early KFRC recordings from 1966. And one of our major acquisitions has been from the granddaughter of Chris Christensen, a KYA engineer. He did a scrapbook from 1929 to 1974 of KYA material. And it's just amazing. He also has the first contract for the engineers at KYA with the local union. Also, we have Dave Fowler's collection. We've obtained his, and he has a lot of the Patty Hearst tapes. So now we have to digitize those, and we'll have those available in the future. And we also picked up the final group of Mike Schweitzer's vast tape collection, so we've added that to our collection also. So we're getting more, we want more. If you see some stuff, we've lost a lot of stuff over the years, and we still need to get more. So let us know if there's anything that you see that we can pick up. And now it's time to get on with the show, and of course our budget cuts and not enough money. We tried to get the Blue Man Group, but we couldn't do it. So we ended up with our one-man blue crew, Don Blue and Big 1037. So Don, come up and lead us the rest of the way.
All right, item number 1 has been followed. That was I needed a flat spot. There we go. We're all good on that. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here for our Hall of Fame induction ceremony today. I'm honored to be the MC. I am a member of the 2007 class of the Hall of Fame. And thank you. I also am a member of the Minnesota Radio Hall of Fame. Although there they set the bar a little lower. One of the stations that I worked for, a news station, and their slogan was, if it happens in the Twin Cities, it's news to us. They were spectacular. So, now I am at Big 1037, which we like to call the witness protection in the Bay Area. We will do anything to get some publicity. Our boss says it's not a content issue, it's an awareness issue. So, anything we can do. You know that Colin Kaepernick and Russell Wilson were featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated. We thought our version of it would be just fine. Take a look, see what you think. Really, who's abs? Come on. Huh? Who's our spectacular? That's Carolyn McCardle, by the way, my co-host, who I love, and she hates that frickin' picture. Just to let you know. So, when it comes to great radio stations in the Bay Area, the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame station for the year of 2014 is Live 95 KSAM. Now, that was celebrated, by the way, in June. The induction ceremony took place and all of that, so congratulations to them. Today, though, it is about the people. It's about the legends. And that's what we're going to do today, is induct 9 people into the Hall of Fame. So, actually, I am here sort of as the timekeeper and to make sure that things run on course. I'm here to set a good example. Last year's lunch lasted 2 hours and 45 minutes. The year that I was inducted, 2007, the lunch was 1 hour and 9 minutes. Now, I will admit there were still a lot of dead people that they were putting into the Hall of Fame then. They didn't say a lot, so I get it, but still. Here's what I want you to think about. You people are all radio people. I mean, you know what it's all about. I want you to think about how proud you were about how much you could say on the 14-second intro of Maggie May. Okay? And that's what you need to think about today. I want you to think about how brief you can be. Now, we will be using a new system this year called the Barbieri Chimes. For those of you unaware, Ralph Barbieri, who I thought was kind of an idiot until I found out he sued KNBR and got $4 million. What kind of an idiot is that? Not such an idiot, obviously. I'm sure Tony Salvador is going to talk about that later on. Or perhaps he won't. Anyway, so Ralph Barbieri goes on for 27 minutes about things that no one cares about, after the first couple of minutes. So we now have the Ralph Barbieri chimes. Our presenters have 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, they will hear this chime. At 3 minutes, they will hear this chime. Personally, I can't tell the difference between the two of them. Yeah, no, I got it. Just kidding. So, now our presenters, so they get 3 minutes, and our inductees will get 6 minutes. At 5 minutes, our inductees will hear. At 6 minutes, they will hear. 6.5 minutes, their mic will go down. So, what I would, if you happen to hear that second chime, immediately say something like, "Here's Maggie May," and then go away. And you'll be done for the day. Now, the other part of this is to make sure that your speech covers everything. I have done some research, and I have found out the most important and interesting fact about each one of our inductees today, which I will be happy to include so you don't have to, and you don't have to go over time or anything like that. Okay, so here's the thing. I will say, did you know 15 minutes can save you 15% on your car insurance, and you will say...
Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows that. KQED people over here go, "We don't watch commercial TV." Okay. All right, you don't have to do it, but everybody else. So, did you know 15 minutes can save you 15% on car insurance? But did you know that our first Hall of Fame inductee in the Pioneer category, Norm Davis, saw Harry Truman speak from the back of his campaign train in 1948? And that his daughter Susie streaked a Tower of Power show at the Oakland Coliseum at the age of 15. And she also got all 4 of the Ramones autographs on a $1 food stamp. Ladies and gentlemen, presenter and streaker, Susie Davis.
Hi. This is great to see everybody here. And I'm quite honored to be able to induct my own father. So when people ask me where I grew up, or when I'd meet people and they go, "Where did you grow up?" I would say San Francisco, and Colorado, and Kansas, and Idaho, and Oregon. And invariably they would ask me, "Was your dad in the military?" And I go, "Nope, he was a DJ." My dad's devotion to radio took us all over the western United States. But throughout the years, we kept returning to the Bay Area. In the 50s and 60s, Dad worked at KSAY, KOBY, and KYA as a high-energy top 40 jock, where he was given the monikers of Al Knight and Lucky Logan. While at KYA, he founded a swingers club for his listeners and also participated in a historical, hallucination-inducing 140-hour wake-a-thon in order to raise money for charity. We found ourselves back in the Bay Area in 1970, where Dad had a weekend show on KSFO that pushed the limits of that station's coolness factor. It was called, and this is for real, Norman's Organic Mind Garden. It was the 70s, after all. Proudly, Dad claims to be the first DJ to ever play Led Zeppelin on that stalwart of a station. Then in 1973, we were back in the Bay Area again, and Dad was hired at KSAN during its heyday as the center of the Bay Area counterculture scene. Since I was a teenager at that point, we both participated with mind-numbing enthusiasm in the celebratory atmosphere of that station, in the celebratory atmosphere of the Bay Area in the 70s. Dad held down the all-night shift for 6 years there and was known for his creative and demented approaches to production, among other things. In 1975, he also went on to host one of the first punk rock shows in the country, and it was amazing that KSAN was not fined out of existence when they interviewed the Sex Pistols live on the air. Dad fully embraced the artistry of freeform radio at KSAN. He had books of records sorted by key and sorted by subject, and he really viewed radio as a vehicle for his personal creative self-expression. After Tom Donahue died, new management was brought in, and the first thing they did was thin out the library. And then, as I remember the story, at a staff meeting one day, they informed all the jocks that all the DJs would now be required to play 2 records per hour from an emphasis bin. Well, Dad could not tolerate this sort of restriction on his creativity. He stood up at that meeting and in a moment that could have only happened in the 70s said, "That is not what I was hired to do, and I'm not going to do it." Needless to say, that was the end of that. He went on to work at KSJO, and then in 1981 became the program director for KTIM AM up in San Rafael, designing a truly hip big band and jazz format for that station. Then in 1986, he worked at the last semi-freeform station in the Bay Area, KKCY, the city, which became KOFY before its fall off the dial. My dad not only carded a wife and kids around the country, he also carded many, many records, and is still the proud owner of about 6,000 of them, as well as thousands of CDs and boxes of reel-to-reel tapes, which I recently helped him move from Taos, New Mexico, up to Boise, Idaho. But in spite of leaving a trail of strained backs behind him, his love of collecting things has led him to amass an amazing archive of radio history, much of which can be heard on his website that he created to commemorate KSAM at jive95.com. It's an amazing site. His personal journey through radio can be visited at radiothrills.com. Please welcome Bay Area radio pioneer Norman Davis.
I'm sorry we don't have time for Norm. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. It's really great to see so many people still interested in radio. I have accomplished a lot of things in my long life. Some I'm proud of, and some I'm not so proud of. I think my proudest accomplishment was fathering Susie Davis. So I was lucky enough to be born when radio was still in its golden years. When that was before TV, and radio had all the variety shows, comedy and drama and music that you now find sometimes on television. And when I was a little kid, we did gather around the radio in the evening. And my mom was a really religious person, and she thought that fiction was a lie. So I wasn't allowed to listen to any of the dramas or the kids' serial shows or any of that. But we got to listen to shows like The Aldridge Family and Fibber McGee and Molly and Dr. IQ, The Mental Banker, and a few other programs. So I really fell in love with radio then, and despite the sorry state of commercial radio today, I still think there's magic there if you know how to use it. My first appearance on the radio was, believe it or not, 74 years ago. I was 5 years old, and my grandma belonged to a church in Casper, Wyoming, where we lived at the time. And her church had a 15-minute radio show on a local station at 5 o'clock on Sunday morning. So they asked me to come over, and I played Jesus Loves Me on my violin. That was my first appearance. And then when I became a teenager, technical advances had produced tape recorders. And I couldn't afford to buy one. They were really expensive. But a local music store in Boise would rent a reel-to-reel to you for the weekend for $5. So I rented a tape recorder, and then I and my sisters, who are here with me today, would create parodies of radio shows, Jungle Jim and Captain Midnight. And we had a great time doing that. Let's see, my first real full-time, my first job in radio started at KGEM in Boise. I was going to college then, and that was before colleges had their own radio stations. So they asked me if I would go out and find a local station to broadcast a college program. So I and a friend did that, and we found KGEM. And their program director was stuck with a Saturday afternoon shift. He didn't really want to work. So he taught me how to run the board so that I ended up really doing his shift for no pay, of course. And after I had done that a while, they asked me if I'd like to really work in radio, and I, of course, said yes. And they offered me a deal. They said, there's this guy who does these radio schools. I think his name was Bill Ogden. And remember him? And he would teach you how to pass the test the FCC gave you to get a first ticket, a first degree license. And they said all I had to do was come up with $300 to pay this guy who would go down to Salt Lake City and take the test in my name. And then I would have a first ticket and could work at the station. Well, fortunately, my folks wouldn't loan me the money to do that. And I, found out later I probably would have been banned from radio for life if something like that went down. So I didn't do that, but they gave me a job at the great salary of $1 an hour. And my first shift was on a Sunday. Oh my God, so soon. My shift was on a Sunday, and that was before cartridges, so all the commercials were on little 5-inch reels of tape, and I had 2 Magna cords behind me. So I would make the break, hit the record, turn around, rewind the 2 tapes, re-cue 2 tapes for the next break, and barely make it in time for the break. Do that, and that was a 10-hour shift, broken only up by a 5-minute ABC newscast on the hour. I should have known right then. And then later, the manager of the station left town in the middle of the night, owing a bunch of money. It took me several weeks to get my $40 for my 40 hours I had worked. And so that's how my radio career started. And it has gone on a very long time since then. The latest thing I can say is that I'm still on radio. I still do a syndicated blues show called The Midnight Flyer. And in 2 weeks, I'm starting a new blues show called The Juke Joint on KRBX in Boise. I still love to do radio. I still think it's magic. Thank you.
Over here, Norm. Here we go. Coming up now is our sports category. Oh, by the way, did you know that 15 minutes can save you 15% on car insurance? But did you know that everybody changes their name in radio except Steve Bitker and Stan Bunger, who look more like their name Bitker and Bunger than anybody except Mike Peckner? Please welcome Stan Bunger.
I actually had the opportunity to change it, but when I told him I liked Stan just fine. Anyway, I think it was the legendary New York sports writer Jimmy Cannon who used to say, sports is the toy department of life. Our next inductee does work in the sports department. He's never treated it like a plaything. Steve Bitker grew up here in the Bay Area, and that was his real name. If he'd only been 2 feet taller, he might have played in the NBA, like his Woodside High School classmate Rich Kelly. But basketball's loss has been radio's gain. What I think sets Steve apart from your run-of-the-mill concept of a sportscaster is not only does he read books, but he's actually written one. He spent 5 years tracking down all of the guys who played on the original 1958 San Francisco Giants, the team that brought Big League Baseball to Northern California. And in fact, Steve may want to tell you the story, but if he doesn't, I'll tell you. He is still lionized in part of the Caribbean where he went as part of the research on the book. I understand Steve and Alice are going to junket themselves to the Caribbean in the not-too-distant future. He may not be a big celebrity in this room, but he's a really big one down there. And by the way, Steve has copies available to sell after the show today. Steve is a sports journalist, and I want to put an accent on the second word. He cut his teeth as a part-time sports writer for the Redwood City Tribune. He worked as a news writer under the great Jeff Scove at the great KSFO back in the 1970s. He worked as a news anchor and reporter in Fresno, and I'm betting he's the only member, or will be as soon as he's inducted, of the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame who can say he covered news and sports in Japan, where Steve lived for a couple of years. He's still our go-to guy. Susan backed me up on this, on all things Japanese when it comes to pronunciations. 7 more years covering the news at KNBR, where Steve worked with Bob Lazich, who will be inducted here in a few minutes, and Gil Harm, many of the other legends of a news department that really was a meaningful news department in those days. And Steve was a news reporter. Let's not forget that fact before he came to KCBS. It's probably a false wall, the one between news and sports. It's not about anything but the seeking of truth and the telling of stories and the transmission of information. And in all of those things, Steve excels, and Bay Area listeners have been the beneficiaries for many years. Some things you should know about Steve that he probably won't tell you himself. Number 1, do not get into a sports trivia contest with this guy, especially if it involves the Giants bullpen of the 1960s. He's still angry at Ron Herbel. He really does watch all the stuff in those Comcast spots he talks about. And he retains a sweet and innocent belief in the positive values of youth sports. I'd like to now present my colleague, friend, neighbor, and daily carpool partner, Steve Baker.
When in doubt, just call 1-800. No, I'm not going to say this. Everybody knows, yeah. Hey, if they offered you what they're offering me. Wow, it's great to be here. Don't start the clock on me yet, please.
Too late.
I believe it was Groucho Marx who once said, I don't want to become a member of any club that would have someone like me as a member. Nevertheless, I greatly appreciate this honor and recognize it for what it is in part, and that is the fact that I've been doing this for a long, long time. This being radio, although as Stan mentioned briefly, I started in print and also spent time in television. Television. Let me touch on television for a second. Television visuals can be astounding, of course, but it's also a passive medium for the viewer. We sit, we watch, and if we watch too long, we become numb. We've all been there. If we see a news anchor wearing a crooked tie or with unruly hair, chances are we won't hear a thing he says because we'll become fixated with the tie or the hair. It's the nature of the medium. I should know because I anchored many newscasts in Japan with crooked ties and unruly hair. With radio, as you all know, our minds are always active. We hear the words wherever we are. We use our imaginations to put pictures behind the words, unless we're listening to a Bud Selig news conference in which we immediately fall asleep. Stan mentioned my first post-collegiate job was at the world's greatest radio station, KSFO, and it really, really was. I was hired as a news writer, a part-time news writer by Jeff Scove, who was a wonderful mentor, a great news anchor, and who belongs in this Hall of Fame. He belonged before I did. When he interviewed me, he asked me to imagine myself 10 to 15 years down the line and what I'd like to be doing or who had the kind of job I'd like to have. And I said Al Michaels, Lon Simmons, Giants play-by-play announcers. I said Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes. And I said Roger Angel, the incomparable writer of baseball books and columns for the New Yorker. And over the years, I've been able to branch out and do some of those things I dreamed of doing. I was a baseball radio play-by-play announcer for 12 years, announced more than 400 games, 7 years in the minors in Rohnert Park, and 11 years in the majors, backing up Bill King and Ken Korak with the A's before they moved to 95.7. Curse that decision. Stan mentioned the baseball book I wrote, Labor of Love. When growing up near Stanford, my parents always had KSFO on in the house and in the car. KSFO had the Giants, it had the 49ers, it had great news anchors and reporters, Jeff, Dave Henderson, Aaron Edwards, Bill Hayward, Mike Powell, great DJs like Al Jasbo Collins, Russ the Moose Syracuse, Jim Lang, the late Jim Lang, just passed away, Emperor Gene Nelson, Buddy Hatton, the list goes on and on. For me, working alongside these legends for 2 years, just out of college, was like being a kid in a candy store. It was a dream come true. After returning home from Japan, I got to work alongside more legends at KNBR for 7 years. DJs Frank Dill, Mike Clary, Ron Lyons, C.J. Bronson, Carter B. Smith. News anchors, including the great Bob Lazich. Bob had a fabulous voice, still does, had no patience for lazy colleagues in the newsroom. One day, after finishing a story, I asked Bob, "So Bob, is there anything else you'd like me to work on?" He glared at me and said, "Yeah, hustle up another damn story." I am truly honored to be sharing the stage with Bob today. Wonderful man, incomparable journalist. And then the last 23 and a half years at KCBS, 23 and a half years. Holy shit. I computed this, I have done roughly, Hal will appreciate this, I've done roughly 64,860 sportscasts. I am no longer the kid in the candy store. I've often been asked, what's the one story I've covered that stands out over any of the others, and the answer is easy. Shortly after I started at KCBS, a story that began in the spring of '92 and ended nearly a year later. The Giants were sold, almost moved to Tampa St. Pete. Station was spending money like it has never spent money since. Sent me to owners' meetings in St. Louis and Phoenix, to National League President Bill White's office in New York City. I was regularly in touch with key sources almost on a daily basis, one of whom is now part owner and president of the Giants, Larry Baer. Back then he worked for CBS in New York. It was a great story to work on, to stay with for months, and to see it to its conclusion, which turned out to be a great thing for the city of San Francisco. I've been fortunate these years at KCBS, so many great top-notch anchors and reporters, and all of us working for a boss, Ed Cavanero, who's an extremely nice man, and one who knows... Yeah, fight me. One who knows how to manage a hustling, bustling newsroom, not to mention dozens of personalities and egos, and that's no small task. Thank you, Ed. I've been blessed to work alongside such pros as Stan Bunger, Susan Lee Taylor, Kim Wonderly, Mike Sugarman, and Hal Ramey in sports. They're all here today. I thank them for being here, although it probably doesn't have much to do with me. I can truly say that Hal and I have never had a crossword with each other in those 23-plus years, while we've enjoyed more than our share of good times together. And through it all, I'm still doing these twice-an-hour morning drive casts, but I never take it for granted. I know there are tens of thousands of people listening every hour, hundreds of thousands of every day, and I owe it to them to give it my best, to be sharp, informative, not shill for the local teams, be fair, be pointed when necessary, use sound creatively, and never use sound on the air for the sake of sound, but only when it contributes intelligently to the story. Finally, this is it, folks, I promise. Back to those 3.5 years I spent in Japan. It was an incredible experience, culturally and socially, making more worldly than I ever imagined. And talk about being blessed. It's also when I met my future wife in Hong Kong, and as a result, it has given me a family of dreams. Alice, my daughters Mei-Ling and Janelle, and my son-in-law Cale. And without them, my life would be a small shadow of what it is. And because they're all here today, this is indeed a very, very special honor. Thank you.
Way to go, Stan Bunger. Nice job. Bickner, Bunger, Blinger. So, by the way, did you know? Did you know that Hall of Fame inductee in the engineering category, Bill Ruck, and his wife, Siobhan, collect antique motorcycles, including a 1938 Indian Chief that has now been politically and correctly renamed the 1938 Native American CEO. I didn't know if you know that. Here is our presenter. Oh, by the way, the engineering category has been selected by the Society of Broadcasting Engineers, San Francisco Chapter 40. So there are some outside sources that have been involved here. So please welcome Tony Salvador as our presenter.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Don.
You're
Don't ignore me. Anyway, first of all, I was very, very pleased when Bill called and asked me if I would present him to the group for his induction into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. I'm very, very proud of that. Thank you very much for that honor, Bill. And I would say to you that there are a couple of very important dates, year dates, that are important to Bill. 1979, 1982, 1983. 1979 is when he joined KFOG. 1982, when he went to work for yours truly. I know that was a very important date for you. And actually, the most important date is 1983, when he met his lovely wife, Siobhan. So there you go. Those are the three most important dates in Bill's career. I would say to you that Bill was a extremely magnificent engineer. And as all engineers, as all people know, are very, very technical. And he'd come into my office and start telling me some story. And I'd say to him, wait, Bill, give this to me and Tony talk, okay? You know what? The engineering thing went right over my head. I might have been running all these stations, but when it came to this kind of stuff, I had to depend on these guys. And he was a guy I could absolutely depend on. I'll leave it with this story, because I don't want to hear that shine. Okay, I'll leave you with this story. One day, Bill comes into my office and says, Tony, look, we've got a little problem. We've got some hazardous material down in the Cambiar transmitter site that's going to need to be taken out of there. I said, well, that's fine. Let's do it. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, there's about 10 half-gallon cans of paint, a 5-gallon can of paint thinner, and some varnish and whatever. And I said, well, all right. I mean, it doesn't seem like a big, a big problem to me. Why don't we just get rid of it? He said, well, you know what? To do this right, we're going to have to get hazmat. And I said, hazmat? Wait a minute. I mean, 10 half-gallon cans of old paint and some paint thinner. I mean, why can't we just get rid of it ourselves? And he said, well, we're really going to have to call hazmat. So I said to him, well, Bill, look, I wonder if you can do me a favor. I said, why don't you just take your truck some night, go over to the the transmitter site, just put it in the back of your truck and just get rid of it. So he looked me straight in the eye and he said, okay, let me just get this straight. So you're asking me to break the law? I said, well, Bill, you know what? Probably a pretty good idea to call hazmat. Very good. Anyway, with that, Bill Ruck.
Finish this. I was wondering. Probably 45. Quite a few. Make sure it doesn't have a
Thank you very much, and thank you, Tony. By the way, big hand for Tony Salvador, the best boss in broadcasting business. Well, I blame it all on Don Sherwood. Okay. I thought that Charlie Smith had the best job in the world. And my thought was at that time was that when I grow up, I want to be Don Sherwood's engineer. Well, they didn't get to do that. And there are a few out there that will probably say, hasn't grown up either. But they did get to work some really, really great people. People in the Hall of Fame like Bob Lasich and Peter Finch from this year's class. And, well, let me think here. Barney Simmons and Dave Morey and a whole bunch of others. Dave Morey is still my favorite. Oh, and Rosalie, and Isabel, and of course Tony, and even Ralph Rue. And it was working with these people that were the best part of the business. The thing that was the most fun. I can browbeat a recalcitrant transmitter to going back on the air, and I'm really good at twisting wires together, but it was working with all these great creative people that was the really fun part of the job. And even though there were some interesting personality things going on, but it was the people that made this business so wonderful. That's the problem. You go to a radio station today, there's nobody there. You know, in the back room, there's a hard drive putting something between commercials, but where's the weekend crew? Where's the all-nighters? Where's the part-timers? They don't exist anymore. Where's the class of 2024? Right? There's nobody coming up into the business. So I'm going to tell a quick story here. How many people here remember Ed Robbins? Ed Robbins? Oh, okay. When I started at KFOG, Ed was the afternoon announcer, and KFOG was beautiful music. Not just any kind of beautiful music, it was Schulke Radio Productions. And Jim Schulke had a con. He would positively guarantee your station would be number one, absolutely positively, of course in the fine print, if you followed my format. You get emails, you get memos like, well, the reason why your ratings dropped is because Tuesday at 3:30, the announcers waited 2 pauses before he started the announcement. And alongside that was some very, very difficult technical requirements that exceeded lunatic fringe. And the previous engineer had lost confidence with his management, so they hired me. Oh, Steve Edwards, where are you, Steve? It's all your fault, Steve, because Steve hired me at KFOG. Well, one of the requirements was I had to completely rebuild the tape machines. Remember tape, 10.5-inch reels? 2 weeks before the start of every book. And so I would start working on the tape recorders, and I'd work in the afternoons. And Ed worked in the afternoons, and Ed was convinced that I was put on the earth to torment him. So after a couple of days of this, he would get testy, and a couple of days he'd get nasty. And finally, he would blow up at me and yell and scream, and I'd say, Ed, you can be replaced with a voice synthesizer, and I'll still be here to fix it. And that would set him off, and he'd run into the closet and close the door and slam the door. Well, that's the problem, is that, well, I was wrong, because in 1979 I didn't look at the future that well, but all of those people, the people we've worked with, the people in the Hall of Fame, all those people have been replaced. I think that's really sad, and I think that's not a good sign for longevity of this business. So anyway, I want to thank you for that, and then all my fellow engineers. I'm sitting with a couple over there, and the SBE that nominated me and elected me to do that. I want to take this moment, though, to add, to propose a nomination for next year. One of my mentors was Ken Nielsen, and this year I asked the SBE to put him on the list. Ken was an engineer. Ken put the first FM station on the air on the West Coast, KALW, before World War II. And he worked at KLW, put thousands of people to work in broadcasting. So he needs to be nominated for educator because he was the one at the John O'Connell School before the Samuel Gompers. How many people here went to John O'Connell or Samuel Gompers? You know, like a couple over there. Good. I think it's very important that Ken get mentioned for that. So another quick Bill Ruck story. I'll tell very fast. I got out of the Navy and I went to the John O'Connell School, broadcast engineering, and this guy shows up, and Jack Phillips kind of evaluated him and said, I got a smart-ass young kid here. What am I going to do with this kid? And he decided that he was going to have his entertainment for the summer, that he would set up that smart-ass young kid with the old man, Ken Nielsen. So that summer, Ken was rebuilding studios, and I was sitting there wiring. And Jack thought this would be really great because the fur's going to fly, hammer and tongs. Boy, this is going to be the most entertaining in the world. Well, unfortunately, I didn't meet up to his expectations. I realized that Ken Nielsen knew. And I learned from him how the discipline of how to plan things and organize stuff and how to do all that work. I had the opportunity to tell Ken at his 95th birthday party, you taught me, what you taught me in that summer got me into the NBC Olympic team. So it's people like Ken Nielsen that was my mentor that need to be out there, and I think that's why I'd like to recommend him for nomination for Educator of the Year. One very last comment. We lost a member of our engineering committee this week. Don at KCSM died after a long thing, and Don was a really great engineer. He's also a really nice guy. We need more nice guys in this world. So, again, thank you very much.
What are you guys doing over at that engineering table anyway? Huh? You guys are crazy. You're all crazy. All right, so did you know that the Hall of Fame inductee in the specialty category Ed Cavagnaro and his wife Barbara had their first date right here at Spenger's Restaurant 40 years ago. How about that? Is that amazing? You waited 2 hours. Well, you're going to wait 6 hours today, so welcome. And he closed the deal in the parking lot, she said. Not this parking lot. I'm just kidding you about that. And by the way, Ed's presenter, who is Mike Sugarman, was a contestant on the dating game and was selected for the date in the Bahamas and still owes back taxes for that trip. So, Mike Sugarman.
A dating game story will never die. All right, I think this is time, my introduction. Here's Ed! No, okay. No, I shouldn't, because he deserves much more than that. I know this because I was inducted last year in the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame by my best friend in radio and best friend in life, my wife, Janice Wright.
She's over here.
Well, look at her. She looks just like you. And as you can tell, because on page 3 of the program, I'm listed in Mike Sugarman. I'm in Barhof. B-A-R-F-O-F. Barhof. It sounds like a product that you would hear advertised on KCBS, as a matter of fact. All right, so this is the time that I would stand up here and tell kind of a funny, wacky story about Ed Cavagnaro, who I've known for 35 years. Just some kind of lighthearted story. I got nothing. I mean, Ed is one of my best friends. I've spent a lot of time with him, and I'm not going to say he's dull, but I won't say that. But he is steady Eddie. That's what his friends call him. He has one beer at a Giants game. His wife tells me he's never been drunk. Take it for knowledge. I don't know that either. Look at the screen. He's been at one station. I mean, we had everybody else has 27 stations. He's got one station. Which, in the shark-infested waters of radio management is unbelievable. 1988, I'm not good at math, is that 25 years? He's been the news director of KCBS for 25 years. That is, I'm sure, a world record in American radio. American radio has been around for 100 years, right? He's been the news director for a quarter of the entire time. And, sometimes, I'm sorry about that. Sometimes, he can be, he's hands-on. You hit the sounder, the business sounder at 15. And maybe he'll come running in and say, that's the wrong sounder. What sounder is it, 15 to 45, ladies and gentlemen? Sure. Everybody knows that. Because of Ed Cavagnaro. Because our ratings have been so high, and the popularity of the station has been so great, and literally in a crisis, he is the first one in that booth helping out. What can I do? How can I help you? He has the best news judgment of anybody I know. And I am proud to call him my friend. Ed Cavagnaro.
So when you're born with the name Ed, and it's Edmund, you can either become, in grammar school, Steady Eddie or Fast Eddie. So I have been called Fast Eddie, but it was usually in a sarcastic way, I do admit. One of our local sales managers always called me Fast Eddie, but she was always smiling when she said it. I'm only standing here because of people like Mike Sugarman, Stan Bunger, Susan Lee Taylor, Kim Mungerly, Hal Rainey, Steve Dicker, Janice Wright, because of people like Al Hart, who's not here today, but his wife is here representing Al. Pat, where are you? Pat. And other people like Gil Haar, who worked at KCBS, Paul Hosley. That's why I'm here. Now, because that's true, there's only one set of call letters there. Let me tell you about how that doesn't happen by itself. It takes, and I have been at KCBS, I've been the news and program director for 26 years, but I've been at KCBS actually for 37 years. And to stay at one place that long, it takes some special things to come together to happen that way. First thing is you have to like living in the Bay Area. And I was born here, and I'm so proud that I could still live here all that time. And by the way, it's a great, great news area. It's a great news town to put it all together. And of course, that's what makes it so special. Another thing, you need to pick the right business. And I picked broadcasting, more specifically the medium of radio, which we know is the best medium. It's the most personal. It's the most fun. And for radio news, what other medium allows you to be so close to the news, to hear the news as it is happening? The only thing between a reporter and a microphone and the radio and the listener is the reporter in the street on the phone, getting on quickly no matter when it happens, even if it's 3:20 on a Sunday morning, has happened recently. Then you need to pick the right company. And when I was getting out of college and going on to graduate school in journalism, at that time, two city desk reporters for the Washington Post were bringing down the President of the United States. And at that time, journalism was the highest calling, in my mind at least. And to then become a member of the broadcast group and to see that CBS was the standard in our mind for broadcast news, and then to be hired at CBS was just an honor. And I'm proud to say it's as much as an honor now as it ever has been. And the call letters KCBS, to me, are just the best ever. I just love that fact that I work at KCBS, and I always have. And it was such an honor at that time, and it still is at this time. And I'm proud to say that in all those years, no one has ever tried to tell us anywhere in CBS, or my bosses, the 5 great general managers I've had over those years, no one has ever told us what to cover or what not to cover, tried to tell us that. And that's amazing, I think. I really appreciate that. Then you have the listeners. You have to give credit to the listeners, because if you're in programming and radio, no matter what kind of radio station it is, and we're represented here by so many different formats and so many different stations, you need loyal listeners. And we've always tried very hard, all the people here at KCBS who are in this room and the rest of them, we've always tried very hard to approach the news straightforward manner, honest manner. We tell the news quickly, fairly, accurately, and our listeners reward us with their loyalty year after year after year, and it's been a success because of our listeners. Then you need a great family, and I've got a great family who know that I have to help manage a 24/7 news operation and get calls in the middle of the night, and I want to thank my wife Barbara and my daughter Elizabeth. And we're about to start in our family our own 24/7 operation, because my daughter Elizabeth is pregnant with our first grandchild on the way. And her husband Scott. Thank you. Maybe not 24/7 for us, Barbara, but for Scott and Elizabeth, I'm sure it is. And then, of course, the station itself, KCBS. And what is a station other than the great people who work there? And I've been so honored to work over the years with literally, you can imagine, 37 years, hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds. Together, we've covered stories of incredible achievement. We've covered stories of unspeakable tragedy. We've, in our personal lives, dealt with a lot of ups and downs. We've laughed together. We've cried together. In a way, we've all grown up together through all those years. And it's really like a family growing up together. And I can't imagine a better family than the family at KCBS. And I want to thank everyone there for helping me be why I'm standing here. I want to also thank all of the other inductees who contribute so much to local radio. The vast variety of radio is just amazing, and it's a great place to work in the Bay Area and on KCBS. And I want to thank Barhof for inducting me into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Standing O over here from the family. Standing O. See all his employees suck up to him right there? Standing ovation. Oh, you're the best, Dad. Love it. Nobody better. All the employees. Everybody else in the room? So. Oh, by the way, did you know Bob Lasich, first visit to a whorehouse was when he was 12 years old. It was in Butte, Montana. Now, he delivered groceries. And so when he came in, they hid all the Johns in another room because half of them were his friend's dad. Now, here's the amazing thing is Bob actually brought his wife 3 years later, or several years later, to show her the place, and now she works there every other weekend. I'm just kidding about that. He was 14. Now, she said it would be okay. The presenter for Bob Lasich is a great friend of mine, and when I first came to the Bay Area and worked at KYUU, which was the NBC FM station, and the newsman there was Gil Haar, and I thought, this guy is the epitome of the fabulous newsman. And I still believe it today. So please welcome Gil. That's the news, so now you know, Haar.
That's good. He said it, so I don't have to. Don't start the clock on me yet. I just have to say one thing that I doubt seriously that Norm Davis knows. But when you quit being Art Boy on Kobe, I became Art Boy. Like a lot of us, by now you can start the clock. Like a lot of us, Bob Lasich was not born in San Francisco. I was lucky. He and I, and probably most of us here were not. He worked in radio in Butte and Missoula, Montana, Storm Lake and Sioux City, Iowa. Then in New York, he put himself through Columbia, Jamestown and Fargo, North Dakota, and Minneapolis. Not necessarily in that order. At least two of those cities I never heard of. But Bob worked there. Almost 20 years before he ended up at KNBR, where he spent 30 happy and productive years. We can talk about the happy part afterward. A total of 52 years on the air, all more remarkable because like back then he was only 39. I don't know if 30 years working at one station on the air is a record for an airman. It may be close, but it probably is not a record. And let me say just one other thing in my own knowledge, having worked with him in the same newsroom. The operative word in that is working. Angela Davis and Patty Hearst and Zebra Hillary likes to remember covering the major stories. What I admire most about Bob is his work on the days when the menu was hamburger instead of steak. I used to say at KNEW, there are no slow news days, there are only slow newsmen. Bob was not. He proved it because he could always hustle up a good story. Whether he was physically on the street or whether he was on the horn, you could always count on Bob to get it right, get it written, and get it on the air right now. No nonsense. He was fast. He was accurate. And in spite of obstacles. There's nobody here from Local 51, right? Here's a man who never had to walk in backwards to pick up his check. Bob Lasich.
Call to the engineering table. Call to the engineering table. Here we go.
Am I on? Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Legends, for having me here today on this occasion. I want to spend my time giving credit to a man who was very important in my life, Arnie Angen. Nobody ever heard of him. He never got rich, never got famous. Arnie was a North Dakota farm boy. During the Depression 30s, when farms were dying, radio was coming to life, Arnie managed to find a job in a radio station. And Some years later, in 1948, when I was a junior in high school in Butte, Montana, I had aspired to be a sports announcer. So I hitchhiked out to this station, which was 6 miles out of town, walked in and asked the secretary about getting a job as a sports announcer. And she told me just a minute, and she went back and talked to the manager, and he invited me back in the office, where he quickly explained they do not do sports. But he didn't shoo me away or blow me off. He just interviewed me. Wanted to know about my family and my life and stuff like that. He says, let's hear how you sound. So he took me back to a studio and he got some wire copy off the UP machine. It was UP then, not UPI. No merger yet. 1948. Gave me this copy, directed me to sit at the microphone for the first time in my life. He said, just read the copy and I'll listen to how you sound. Well, the copy was about the war in the Middle East. And it was just full of all these names that I didn't understand, had never seen before. I recognized Bethlehem because we learned that singing Christmas carols in school, which they don't do anymore, I guess. But anyway, I chopped that up, and he called me out, and he said, well, let's sit and talk. So he interviewed me for a little more, and he said, tell you what I'm going to let you do if you want to do this. You come out every day, and you can practice. I'll give you a recorder, a wire recorder no less, and you can practice on the wire recorder, and I'll have the announcers critique your work, and maybe you'll come along okay. Well, I did that all summer, hitchhiked out every day, hitchhiked back after spending about 3 hours out there. At the end of the summer, he called me into his office, gave me a check for $160 and a job for 60 cents an hour. And I was in the radio business. That's how it started. Arnie Engine. Something else nobody knew about him. He also had on that staff a woman announcer, 1948, and an Asian announcer. Good guy. Thank you.
Bob, pretty special those days in North Dakota there, yeah. You know. Holy Christ, remember those days there, Bob? We're out there, the barley field there, you know, the one over by Jones' place there, you know. Holy Christ, that was great, wasn't it? Huh? Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, I worked in Fargo there at KQWB. He worked in Fargo there too, you know. So, you've been around us guys. There you go. Nicely done. All right, to continue on in our news category. Oh, did you know that Peter Finch was in the 6th grade, and when he was, Desi Arnaz's cat had kittens in Peter's garage? Are you kidding me? This is Lucy's kid. Peter's got some explaining to do here tonight. And his presenter is Dennis Constantine.
Hi there. It's my honor to be here. If there's one word that I can use to describe Peter Finch, it's devoted. He's a devoted husband and father, devoted friend. He's devoted to writing stage plays. He's devoted to the local music scene, as we've seen. He loves music, and he's devoted to radio and his what he does for a living. I first met Peter when he was at KMEL, rocking the Bay in San Francisco. He was a jock. I think he was the all-night jock. And he was also covering some news stories. And he called me. I don't know how we connected, but he called me at KBCO. He was going to the Democratic National Convention, and he wanted to know if we needed a stringer. So he did some reports for us. They sounded great. And next thing I know, I'm hiring him to move to Boulder, Colorado from San Francisco to work at KBCO. And we worked together on KBCO in the 80s and 90s, and we did the morning show together. It was great. Peter and Alice were really missing home, though. They really missed the Bay Area. Alice wanted to be with her family. And so in the early 90s, I said, you should go back to San Francisco. And I'm nervous saying that here. Anyway, so he moved back to San Francisco and immediately landed on the KFOG morning show, where he was on the morning show for 18 years, during mornings on KBC on KFOG. With Dave Morey and the crew. It was a great morning show. And in the last 3 years, he's been on KGO doing news at night. Now, Peter started his career in high school in Santa Maria at KXFM. Then he went on to work in Monterey at K-Wave, and then landed as an intern at KMEL. And now here he is. So it's my honor, once again, to induct into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame my friend Peter Finch.
Thank you. Oh, it's the broad. Thank you, God. When I saw the full list of... I want to start out by congratulating all the other inductees, because when I saw the full list, my reaction was, this makes me look great. Because to be included with such an impressive group of people was just golden. It was a wonderful feeling. And being inducted and being voted into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame is a huge thrill and an honor for me, and I'll tell you why. When I was a kid in high school, some nights I would toss and turn in bed, unable to fall asleep, because I just wanted to be on the radio so much. And probably some of you can relate to that in this room. And, because it was Santa Maria, a small market, I did get to start out when I was in high school and paid some of my dues there. My sophomore year of college, I was living in the dorms at San Francisco State, and I landed a job as a weekend jock in Monterey at K-Wave. And I didn't own a car, so what I would do is I'd get up Saturday morning, catch a Samtrans bus to SFO, hop on a flight to Monterey, get off the plane, walk across the street to the station, do the 6 p.m. to midnight shift, sleep on a couch that was in the women's restroom. Program director brought in a portable heater so I wouldn't freeze. I'd get up, do the noon to 6 shift, walk back across the street to the airport, fly back to San Francisco, be back in my dorm room by about midnight. I was clearing about $10 a weekend, and I was loving it because I was on the radio. And I think it's indicative of the enthusiasm and the love and the passion I've always had for this medium. I love radio. And I think that's why I'm up here today, because I just love radio and I love being on the radio. And I've been voted in the news category, which is extremely flattering, though to be perfectly honest, I've always considered myself more of a radio guy who just kind of fell into doing news and found out that I really enjoyed doing it. For the bulk of my career, 8 years in Colorado, 18 years on KFOG, I was on an adult album alternative rock station, where half of my job was to be part of the morning show, a sidekick, do the news, and have fun there. And then the other half is I'd go out and I'd interview people, and I'd come back and I'd tell their stories on the radio, and I'd mix in music and sound clips and stuff like that. That has always been a labor of love for me. So it's just been wonderful. And to kind of, believe it or not, start to wind this up, I want to thank all the station owners and managers, program directors, colleagues, listeners who have allowed me to do my thing on the radio over the years, because I truly appreciate it. Specifically, I want to thank Dave Morey for letting me play morning radio for all those years. I want to thank Dennis Constantine for being a great boss, friend, and just a real supporter over the years. Paul Hosley, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to thank you.
3 years ago, he brought me over to anchor the evening news on KGO, where I now deliver the news to dozens of people every night.
Ben Fontoris, please don't quote me on that.
No, but when when Paul brought me over, though, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, those features you do, the fog files, I really like them. I want you to keep doing them. But let's call them the Finch files. And they continue to be a labor of love. I feel like the Huell Hauser of, radio. Yeah, a few public TV people get that. But it's just been a wonderful run, and I'm so grateful. I want to thank my wife, Alice. Last month was our 30th wedding anniversary. So she's been here for most of the run. I want to thank my daughter, Julia, for not hating me when I would talk about her on the radio. It embarrassed her, but she still didn't hate me. I want to thank my mom for giving birth to me. If I'd known it was going to turn out like this, I probably would have gotten more sleep as a teenager. I wouldn't have been tossing and turning. Thank you so much.
So, I remember when the PPM came out. So here we are, we got the diary world now. So the PPM comes out and we go, oh, this is going to be great. Now we're going to find out what people really listen to. And all those people who go, oh, I watch 60 Minutes every week and I listen to KQED every month. And now we're going to find out what they really listen to. They really listen to KQED every week. The other day we're in a meeting and we're listening to some thing with our program director, and as it goes on and the meters fall off. You can just see them. Now they have this technology. You can see the meters fall off. And it goes from like 4 to 2 meters. 4 meters, which is all we had to start. Mr. KQED, Mr. Double Digits over there, fine, yeah. But you realize this whole PPM thing is, of course, here to stay. And we're living with it, and we realize that everybody does listen to KQED. So I get that. And in the this category now, which is the executive category. Oh, by the way, did you know that Joanne Wallace was a classmate of J.J. Cale, and that his hit After Midnight, We're Gonna Let It All Hang Out, may actually be a revelation of what J.J. and Joanne did in the home ec room at Tucson Central High School in Tucson, Arizona. Very, very much a possibility. And now as our presenter, please welcome Carol Pearson.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce a woman who I admire, respect, and am proud to call my best friend. Joanne and I have worked together in radio since the 1960s. We were both faculty wives at Antioch College in Ohio, and Joanne decided that we needed a radio newscast. So she would drive to Springfield every day and pick up the just delivered New York Times and then edit it for radio and do a newscast each day. Eventually, she became the general manager of WISO, the Antioch station, and turned it into an excellent public radio station for the greater Dayton area. She then managed Berkeley station KPFA for one of its many tumultuous years, and then we joined up again at WGBH in Boston, where Joanne was the program director of the radio station. That station soon became the #1 public radio station in the country. Joanne moved on to NPR, where she helped develop NPR into a respected news organization during a time of great growth in the 1980s. Finally, Joanne came back to the Bay Area, where we both had always wanted to end up, and joined me at KQED Radio. The station had just switched to an all news and information format, and Joanne was the perfect person to lead it to become the #1 station in the country and in public radio, and one of the top stations in the San Francisco market. Joanne has demanded excellence in news and broadcasting, but in a way that results in buy-in from everyone. She's loved and respected by the staff and is now responsible for television programming as well as for radio. On the national level, Joanne has served on the boards of most of the major public radio organizations and has been a strong and effective advocate of great public radio programming on the national level. It's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Joanne Wallace, Vice President and General Manager Radio, Vice President TV and Radio Programming, perhaps the longest title in broadcasting. Please. It's not that, it's out there. Carol, thank you. I'm very proud of the fact that the two of us have worked at 3 public radio stations together, and that those stations are actually very, very, very excellent stations. I'm also proud to hear that so many of you listen to KQED, so thank you. My history with Bay Area radio began when I was in college here in the 1960s and continued into the 70s when I was back and forth from Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and other parts of the country, including in Boston when I was at WGBH. When I was here in the 60s and then continuing into the 70s, I listened to great radio here. I listened to KSAN, I listened to KFAT, I listened to other music stations here in the Bay Area, which were really, really fine and very strong. And I listened to KPFA, especially as I began as a student at Stanford. I found listener-supported public radio, which I'd never heard of, coming from Oklahoma, and I was just fascinated by it. The news and information programming that KPFA did, the live drama and literature and music concert programming that they did, and it was all listener-supported, and much of it was volunteer-produced. KPFA, as you all know, is an irreverent, sometimes very wacky and interesting station, sometimes very troubled by its management and operations. But it was a bedrock of my experience, and it's part of what I took with me when I moved to Antioch College, and Carol and I both discovered the student station there and began to volunteer and then to work for the station itself. Coming to KQED in 1990 was a dream job, because by that time I had worked in public radio for more than 15 years. Most recently, as Carol said, in the news division at National Public Radio in Washington. National Public Radio was really beginning to emerge as an important news and information network, and it was a real honor to work there in the news division. In 1990, when I came, KQED had changed formats 3 years earlier, and Paul Hosley's brother was at the station at the time, and when I came to KQED, I actually was hired into the position that he had as general manager of radio for KQED. In 1987, KQED had changed format from a classical music and news and information station to all news and public affairs, and it was very tumultuous, very controversial with listeners, and also very, very interesting to work in a station that was switching to an all news and information format. It was also very controversial because many people in our industry did not think that a public radio station working in the FM medium, all news, would succeed.
It was seen as a real experiment, and KQED was the first public radio station in the nation to try a news and information format on FM. And now in Boston and Chicago and New York, all across the country, there are all news and information public radio stations that are very successful, and I'm very proud of that. I think a lot of the credit for that actually is owed to Carol, who was the program director at KQED at the time and the architect of the KQED public radio news and information format. So flash forward to today. The KQED experiment that started 25 years ago and has turned out to be a real success. And for the past 5 years, KQED has been, as Carol said, the most listened to public radio station in the nation. And it does consistently rank in the top rated radio stations here in the San Francisco market. There are so many people at KQED on the air and behind the scenes who have helped build KQED into the station that it is today. In 1993, I'm going to speed up here, Michael Krasny left KGO and came to KQED as the host of our morning 2-hour talk and interview program. And this past year, actually in June, we celebrated Michael's 20th anniversary with KQED. With, as you can imagine, lots and lots and lots of kudos for Michael, and a listener event that filled the Norse Theater in downtown San Francisco with listeners coming to finally see Michael Krasny, what he looks like, and show their appreciation for him. Scott Schaefer and Rachel Myro are hosts of KQED's statewide news service, the California Report. Scott and Rachel. Joshua, I'm going to speed through here. Joshua Johnson and Nina Kim, who are our morning and afternoon drive time anchors for news. Thuy Vu, who was one of our early news and information anchors, morning anchors, who left for Kron and other television stations in the San Francisco market, and then came back to us recently to host and anchor the KQED television newsroom program. The KQED announcers, Matt Elmore, Michelle Hennigan, Sandy Althouse, and Dave Freeman are the backbone of our listener service, and they are there 24/7, 7 days a week, and we're very proud of them. Danny Bringer is here. Danny is an audio engineer. He has been at the station for 15 years, Danny? 20 years. And is a terrific audio engineer, and he is part of the engineering staff there. Let me just say, and I know that we need to move on, that many of us, and I've heard it in conversations with people I've met here this afternoon, are wondering about the future of radio and are concerned about it. At KQED, news and information is actually growing in our organization. And we have something that we say, because we're growing not only for terrestrial broadcast, but also the news and information service online. And what we say there is radio is not going away, it's going everywhere.
Like KQED says, if it happens in the Bay Area, it's news to us. Good job, Joanne. By the way, I would like to introduce a celebrity in our midst here from the Rolling Stones. Right out here with the camera. Keith Richards, everybody, right here. Thanks for coming by, Keith. I got your stuff in the car. So, that's actually Robert Moore, who's the photographer that takes care of everything here. Thank you very much, Robert. Keith. Okay, so it's time now for the Personality Announcer Awards. Did you know that Celeste Perry is such a good friend that her BFF Brenda spent the night with Celeste in jail, even though Celeste was the only one who was arrested. For, well, perhaps she will tell you and perhaps she won't. Also, did you know that Celeste Perry, who works with me at the Big 1037, forgot her headphones the other day, decided to use mine because she comes on after me. At the end of her shift, put them in her purse and went home. And on Friday morning, I didn't have any headphones. Oh, you have the headphones. Okay, here's my headphones. All right. Okay, you're once removed. You can't come up here. Oh, look at this, huh? Is she a sweetheart or what? Also, to present Celeste Perry into the Hall of Fame, here's Kim Wonderly.
Hey, this doesn't count on the shot clock. I got clearance here. This is a note that was passed to me, and I was asked to read this before I get to my 3-minute on the dot induction. This came from Dave, your Duke Sholin, and he would just like to say, Celeste, there's a minimum age when it comes to enter the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. I understand it took some investigation. They needed to verify your birth certificate. And you know about those questionable statistics from folks born in Hawaii. But, by the end of this luncheon, I think we're going to be all pulling our pensions. So somehow you slip past the screeners, but no doubt you are more than deserving of this honor today. Your Duke could not be happier knowing the Pineapple Princess is in the official Hall of Fame inductee. Sorry I couldn't be there to witness this in person, but he says, I am certainly with you in spirit, and like Alan and your family, thrilled for you. So congratulations from Dave, your Duke Sholin. They worked together at KFRC, which was actually a really great morning show. There's a scale by which you would measure the likability factor of media people. It was called a Q rating for TV. And so you'd have somebody like Frank Dill at the high end of the scale. Everybody loves Frank. And then there'd be somebody like, I don't know, like a Kevin the Rat type character at the other end. I'm kidding. Well, Celeste would be way off the charts. Men like her because she's smart, she's witty, she sounds sexy on the radio. Women love her because she's smart, she's witty, and she sounds sexy on the radio. But it's not in an intimidating way. It's in a way that you really want to get to know her. And that adds up to a great Q rating. Now, as a wee lass growing up in Hawaii, her mom, Bunny, had one ear tuned to the radio constantly, and so Celeste really adored the mellifluous voice of a gal named Joan Gerber. Does anyone remember the story, lady? Anyone? I know Celeste does. She was also a big fan of the syndicated Chicken Man series. And maybe this is a strange synchronicity because Celeste gave up her special education career goals to launch her broadcast career wearing a chicken costume as a mascot at station events. I think that's really solid career planning on Celeste's part. She lands an internship at KKUA, the Big 69 in Honolulu. Not long after, she is on the air spinning records, smooth jazz at the Wave. Eventually, she wound up at the AOR station KQMQ, but by the time they started to institute the playlist, she's out of there. She's over at the mainland now. Okay, so now it's San Francisco, 1982. She's booking some great voiceover gigs. She looks up someone that she knew from Hawaii that was working in the Bay Area right here. His name, Ralph Barbieri. All right, so, okay, after Ralph talked about himself for a couple hours, he actually got her an introduction with a guy named Alan Hotland, right? He was the broadcast legend who was running KSFO, the world's greatest radio station. As fate would have it, the weekend guy had just quit. Celeste was in, and this is with the big boys, right? It's KSFO at its zenith, so the Bay Area is finally hearing her lovely voice for the first time. Golden West sold KSFO to King Broadcasting, ended up switching Celeste over to the FM side, which was KYA, and that had gone oldies, right? It was also right around this time, mid-'80s. I was hired to do music research at KYA. That's where I met Celeste. One day, a client asked me to submit an air check for a position at a traffic company. Well, I had no intention of being on the air at all. I was so over my skis. So what I did, I studied Celeste's delivery intently because I always thought she is the gold standard, right? I went on to make an absolutely horrible demo tape, which I submitted, but I got hired anyway. Thank you, Ron Reynolds. Go figure, but thank you, Celeste. You know, she had a long run at KYA till 95, survived another sale. It flipped to Young Country. She finally got off that mechanical bull in 1999 to stay home and raise her two young sons. She did come back home to radio in 2004. She currently holds down the middays at Big 103.7, in addition to all her on-camera work at TV20. You don't have a career like that by accident. You have it because you were just damn good at what you do. She still looks and sounds like $1 million, and if you're lucky enough to call her a friend, you are very lucky indeed, because I think beyond everything she's achieved in her career, when I think about Celeste Perry, I think of a woman with a tremendous heart. She's our radio friend. She's a broad in broadcasting. She is a fellow Dharma bum of the highest order. She is your Honolulu Lulu and a member of the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame, Celeste Perry.
It was going to be all laughs. I was tearing up there. Thank you so much, Kim Wonderly. So I got to put my glasses on. Or Kim Wonderfully, as I love to call you. A great friend, a terrific broadcaster, and really a true blue friend, which is why I asked you to induct me or induce me here today. It's so appreciated. And I have this whole thing right now that I was going to introduce the broads, but clearly I don't need to. What I would like to say is thank you, Dusty Rhodes, for organizing today's field trip to the fish grotto. The girls thought they were going on an aquarium tour. I hope it's cool that we're here at Spangers. All hail Dusty. Really, thank you so much. And I would like to say thank you to Carter B. Smith, who the beloved, dear Carter B. Smith, who first brought me to the Barhof so many years ago. I think he'd be proud of me, and that makes me feel good. I learned a lot from Carter. He gave me tons of advice, from advice about my bosses to my boyfriends. I just wish I had taken his financial advice, because then I'd be able to afford a radio station for the broads. Thank you to Ron Jacobs. It was Ron Hoodigai Jacobs in Hawaii, who came from San Diego with a chicken suit, which I stepped into in the sweltering heat of the summer of 1978, and it was like 106 degrees in there. It was like a Bikram yoga studio, yeah, downward facing poultry. I mean, it was like your own personal sweat lodge. So I had a few great hallucinations in there, but eventually, they took me aside and they said the chicken suit was made for someone tall, which you're not. So rather than being this long, lean chicken, I looked like a quail. So, you got to get out of there, sister. And this being radio, I failed at that job, so was promoted to another. I became a DJ. And then thank you to Alan Hotland, as Kim mentioned. He gave me my first shot here in radio at 560 KSFO. And this, of course, was the radio business of the early 80s, before there were HR departments that ruined all the fun. So during my interview, Alan offered me a glass of wine in his office, from the bar in his office, which wasn't like a hidden thing. It was a prominent feature in those offices up at the Fairmont Hotel. And a lot like the culture surveys they do today to see if you'll work well with the other employees, I said yes, and that was the right answer, because I got the gig. Let's see, Bob Hamilton. Anybody know Bob Hamilton? Or as I like to call him, Bob Hotline Hamilton. So Bob taught me how to ignore the hotline. It was always ringing while I was on the air, and I just learned to be sort of unflappable. And this was the old days. It was just cell phones. So Bob was tethered, to his phone in his office, and by the time he ran down to the studio, he had forgotten, why he'd come in anyway. He was usually distracted by something Kevin Mostyn had to say. To Tim Jordan and the whole gang at CBS, who teamed me up with David Duke Sholin and Mark Nieto. What a daring experiment that was when I came back into radio in 2007. So to take historic call letters, KFRC, put them on a signal, a frequency that no one's ever heard of, 106.9, and then don't tell anybody about it, no marketing, play 6 hours of music and 18 hours of baseball, and let's see what happens. So nothing happened. We had a lot of fun in that studio, and I mean, ultimately it turned out okay for KCBS, so, and I love all you guys here. To Mike Amatore, who has been my partner in crime in so many production studios across the city. Mike has, all the right processing. And wicked funny, you're responsible for my deepest laugh lines. You're paying for my next Juvederm injections. I do TV now, so you need the fillers. And now I'd like to talk a little bit more personally about my family, who have come here from far and wide, from Hawaii, from Los Angeles, from San Mateo County. They thought they were coming to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. So did you guys ever see me play guitar? Anyway, so they are, they're still waiting for Bruce Springsteen to show up, aren't we all? But I really am so thrilled that you came here today. I'd also like to thank my sons who couldn't be here, Aaron and Harrison, who could not afford the rents in San Francisco, so they now live in New York. Translation, Alan and I have a really cool place in the East Village these days. So that's what's going on there. Let me look through my notes a little bit here. I want to thank my husband, obviously, Alan, sweetheart. He has been my greatest supporter, and I mean that financially as well as spiritually. It is radio, after all. And my most ardent fan all of these years. Alan's a Cal grad and has been threatening to bring me to Spangers for decades now. And this is really our first date at Spangers. How does it feel having Sam with a Hall of Famer, honey? Is that good? So Alan's not in the radio business, clearly. And so he still has this, and as I said, he's my biggest fan. So he still has this naive hope that maybe when Terry Gross finally quits her gig hosting Fresh Air, that I'll get it. You know what I'm saying? WHYY in Philadelphia. Alan, Joanne Wallace is here. Come over and talk to her. And finally, I would like to thank the people where it all began. My mom and my dad, Bunny and Elle, who are no longer with us, but their musical tastes sort of lean more toward the Ray Conniff singers, but they were willing to sit through, a live version of Stairway to Heaven at 3 o'clock in the morning, just to hear me do a weather report in Hawaii. That's riveting. It's sunny and warm, and it'll be sunny and warm tomorrow, and the next day, and probably till the end of the world. So, yeah, they were the bomb. And my mother, when I was reflecting on this speech today, my mother was my first program director. She was able to boost my confidence and my insecurities, at the same time, right? Confidence, insecurities, hovering right over my fragile ego. And here's the best example. I'm wrapping up right here. When I told my mother that I accepted my first full-time gig in radio, she looked at me, she said, "Celeste, that's wonderful, congratulations, sweetheart. Girls can't be disc jockeys." Evidently they can. Thank you, everybody.
I see that every day at 10 o'clock. Pretty exciting. Congratulations, Celeste. Welcome. As we're talking about, everybody's sort of reminiscing about, the good days. Oh my God, it was so great back then. And where are the young people coming from and all of that? And I look out here and I see, the average age here is, 80, 84. And, it's kind of I just had this idea that, we should bring a bunch of young radio people to a lunch like this and hear these stories like Joanne's got and like everyone has, and just how Peter Finch is going, I couldn't sleep at night because I was so excited about being on the radio. I don't think we sell that enough, and somehow, I'm not exactly sure how we do it, but I think somehow we need to do that. The important thing is, did you know Sam Van Zandt flunked his FCC test for his first-class license, which is embarrassing. But he decided his fallback position was he bought a junkyard and started Action Auto Wreckers on Capitol Expressway in San Jose. And it's still there today. That is what we call history. Forget about radio. The auto wrecker business is doing great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to present, we have two presenters, actually. This is a little different. So we have Brian Copeland, but to begin, we have Lisa Chrysler. Come on up, Lisa.
So all my life, I wanted to have Don Bluth say my name. I'm done. I am so out of here. Hey, thank you all for staying because I thought you'd all leave by 1:30. So thank you very much because Sam deserves this. He really does deserve this. And I thought he was at the end. I said, what? So, I look around the room and I think to myself, I don't know why I am introducing Sam because Sam, any one of you could do it. Sam, I think, knows everybody in this room. But more important, everybody knows Sam. Is that not true? Everybody knows Sam Van Zandt. So, embarrassing to Sam, I embarrass him every morning. But the first time, I don't know anybody. I've been at 2 radio stations for 37 years. I know 5 people. So this is a big deal. And the first time I met Sam, I was hosting an ascertainment meeting at K-Bay in downtown San Jose, and he comes in. He goes, hi, I'm Sam Van Zandt. I said, oh my God, that's Sam Van Zandt. And I think we had the meeting about 20 minutes late that day because I could not calm down for meeting Sam Van Zandt. And then look at us. K-Bay got moved to San Francisco to KFRC for 1 year. They would only let us stay 1 year. And then we were going back to San Jose. Okay. But that's how I really got to know Sam. Sam did our public affairs. And about 2 days a week, I guess, Sam and I would run into each other, and we'd yap and yap and yap. And our boss was always in the back room listening to us yap and yap and yap and said, those people know how to yap, yap, yap. They just had this chemistry. He said, I've never seen this chemistry. So the guy I was working with got fired. And 10 years later, it's still Sam and Lisa in the morning. So Sam truly is the best. And to show you what a great guy he is, he said to our boss when we got started, you know what, we can call it Lisa and Sam. I've 37 years never had my name first. And I said, nah, it doesn't sound right. It's got to be Sam and Lisa because he was the guy in radio. I was just like the tag-along woman. So it was Sam and Lisa. It is still Sam and Lisa. And like I said, 10 years later. So, no way. Okay, let me pick it up. Did I get cut because of Brian?
No, it's 3 minutes.
Okay. Anyway, you know all about Sam. You know what a great person he is in the radio business, but I don't know if you know what a great person he is outside of radio. Sam loves the community. Sam is tired. He's old. He needs to take a nap. 2 in the afternoon. He's looking for the teacher of the month. 7 o'clock at night, he's introducing somebody in the community. The man loves the community. So Sam is a Radio Hall of Famer. He loves the community. He lives his life wonderfully. And for me, he is a Friends Hall of Famer. Sam is the best guy you could ever have in your back corner. And some of us have big back corners. He will do anything for you, but you all know that. Sam so deserves to be in the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame because he is a lifelong, he just lives so beautifully. You have done everything right, and I just love working with you. And I'm done!
Come on up. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Copeland, ladies and gentlemen.
Lisa took all the time. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be my first time here at this event, and I look around this room and see it's like, wow, if a bomb went off in this room, a bomb would go off in this room. I found something very interesting I didn't know recently. Sam Van Zandt got his very first radio job the year that I was born. And he did, and I just turned 50 years old, so 1964, so that means Sam is really, really old. And we have to be careful that he doesn't break his hip on the way up here to the New York. I am in radio because of Sam Van Zandt. I grew up in the Bay Area listening to Sam on K101, on KYA, watching him with the 10 o'clock movie on Channel 20. And one day when I was in my early 20s doing stand-up at this pizza place in Alameda called LaBelle's, my career was just zoom, skyrocketing. I had a pizza place in Alameda. That's how I went to the moon. After he'd done, Sam walks up to me, and I'm like, wow, Sam, I think you're really funny. I'm thinking about doing some comedy. Let's talk. So we talked, and we got to be friends and running buddies. And then he was working at KNEW, and he had this idea about doing a bit called the Sunday Funnies because you want to come on the air and do some bits. And so I'd never done it before, and I said, sure. And I did a bit that got to be kind of popular. It was a takeoff on Ray Taliaferro. It was called Jay Tallahassee, the most paranoid black man in America. That was the name of it.
You're absolutely right on my mark, sir. No, please, sir, please.
Anyway, Ron Owens heard that bit, and they heard it at KGO, and KGO hired me because of that bit, and because of Sam. I've been at KGO for 23 years now. So I would like to, I'm honored to introduce a gentleman who is my friend, who is my mentor, and who is truly, honestly, like a dad to me, Sam Van Zandt.
These barbaric charms make me nervous. Can't stand the suspense. Thank you, everybody, for hanging around. Celeste is a hard act to follow. What a wonderful broadcaster she is, too. I have a lot of people I want to thank, and I'm not sure how to start, but I'm going to start by thanking Barhof, of course, and the California Radio Historical Society, because they do so much to boost radio, and they've done so much to support me. Thanks to David Jackson, who also supported me, and the whole crew at K-Bay, who decided that I should get in here and not just get nominated every year. And honest to God, when I got nominated, I think that's good enough. That's good enough. But here I am, and I have to make a speech. So thanks to everybody for that. I want to thank my good friend Steve Edwards, who was my general manager at KU KSAN, for coming all the way down to see it, and the crew at K-Bay, as I said. My family, my daughter Janet, my sons Brandon, Justin, and Jonah, who came to this today, and their beautiful wives. So nice to see you all here for this. My niece Leslie McKinney, who is just about to finish at San Francisco State and go into broadcasting, so after all this, could you talk her out of it? Please. And incidentally, if you need a used radiator, I know just the place in San Jose for that. Got you covered, all right? So, okay, when I got nominated, Clark Reed was the first one to text me. He texted me congratulations, and I texted back for what, And he told me, and suddenly, wow, that's fantastic, keeps coming over on the Twitter. And then I found out that WTF doesn't stand for that. But I was still grateful for the comments, always. And so I had this actual conversation with my wife. I said, what am I going to talk about? What have I done that I can really, put my hands on, besides probably having the record for being fired by James Gabbert more than anyone. Aside from that, what do I have, with the Sherwoods and the Roses and the Blues, the Dons of Bay Area radio? What can I possibly point to myself with pride about? Well, she said, and this is the true thing that I can own, your love of radio and what it does for the community. And that's what it's about for me, if I can get modeling a little bit. I grew up in a kind of a sad, tragic family. I had 3 sisters with muscular dystrophy. So I was the last in the family. As I'm growing up and thriving, my sisters were fading, and my family was kind of a sad place. So what does a kid do under those circumstances? A lot of you can relate. I escaped into radio. Radio became my place. My dad bought me a crystal set. I only got KSJO on it with a little antenna. So I listened to that a lot, and then I would sneak out to the car and listen to KSFO and Don Sherwood, who became my huge hero. And I was fortunate enough to meet him in 1972. He was at Enrico's, and I actually found a parking place and went over to tell him thanks for getting me into the radio. And, of course, Sherwood said, well, don't blame me, kid. You're on your own. But I hung with him for a little while. So it was kind of a sad time, but community organizations helped our family. My sisters were all in wheelchairs, so the Rotary actually built a ramp and a patio in our backyard for us. My sister Patsy lost her glasses, and the Lions Club came through with glasses. My first Christmas present actually came, from the Shriners, because we were that poor at that time. So what do you do with all that? Well, radio became my community, and by extension over time, I realized I could use radio to help the community and help the Rotary and the Lions and all the other organizations, all the parents whose kids are sick, all the parents who care about causes, all the people who believe in something, help them get their voice out there. And we got to do that for so many years. I was just so fortunate. When I came to San Francisco, I worked at KCBS FM, and I was News and Public Affairs Director there. The person to greet me was Kenny Ackerman, the very first personality I met. Wonderful man, made me feel right at home. Kenny and Dave McElhatton. And within a few months, I was News and Public Affairs Director and the morning man on the station. Did that for a long time. Carried a show called 60 Seconds, which was a 15-piece feature that I did. I did 15 new pieces a week, and then took that to K101, then to KYA. Long story short, I always used radio to serve the community, and it always meant a lot to me. One of the things that made my parents proud was, that I did take speech classes, and I did well at them. I remember a Lions Club breakfast where I took third place. Yeah, there were only 3 of us. My mom kept that trophy on the mantle till the day she died. In fact, it was there when my dad passed away, too. And so after all these years, after all the wonderful years with Lisa at K-Bay, where we do so much in the community together, it was just like getting supercharged to come to work with Lisa, because together, I don't know how many things we do a year, but way too many, We gotta sleep sometime. We do a lot of good stuff for the community, and I'm just so proud to work with you. And so happy to be here. And my last thought about it, I know we're trying to be on time here, is that I would give anything today to be able to take that plaque that's waiting for me and put it on the mantle next to that third place trophy and say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, look what I did.
This just in, I just got handed this. One more thing to do. A last detail. Mike Adams to make a special award. Michael, where are you? The San Jose State Weenie. Ruined millions of children that came to him seeking advice.
I promise I'll get you out of here by happy hour.
In Reno.
Yeah, in Reno. I wanted to do this, and I know that many people I'm involved with the California Historical Radio Society also want to do this. The CHRS is kind of the umbrella organization for a lot of us here, including the Bay Area Hall of Fame. And I want to give a special award to our president, Steve Cushman, for outstanding service for the guy who does everything all the time. Let me make my speech first. My little speech here. We began 40 years ago as a parking lot club, an old radio collecting flea market, one of dozens nationally. Now, in 2001, we made our first significant connection with you, the Bay Area broadcasting community, when Harvey Stone of KBLX gave us KRE free of charge and said, go ahead and use it, make your museum there. Well, our president, Steve Cushman again, followed through with Harvey's offer, and from that point, an important transition began. We moved from Radio Club to Radio History and Preservation Group. Now, it was because we built a museum in that facility that we were able to thrive when other groups like us failed. We had the all-important physical location, and with radio as our theme, we welcomed into our fold the Maxwell Communication Library, the Bay Area Radio Museum and Hall of Fame, the Society of the Wireless Pioneers, really, really old people, and of course the Radio Museum and Hall of Fame that you see here. We took these organizations and we shared KRE with all of you, the broadcast legends, because every year you came to us and we let you rehearse and we used you, and we're happy to consider you a part of us. Well, the leader in all this was Steve Cushman. Steve made many ideas from many interested individuals happen. Well, last December, we were just about to purchase KRE when a very typical radio thing happened. A bankruptcy, an ownership change, several indifferent new owners, bankers and children, I think.
Not radio people. And left dangling was CHRS. On our website it said we raised $750,000 in pledges. Immediately we had to find another place to go, and we wanted to buy a place. That we thought was important. Well, we managed to do it. We found a place in Alameda where we are fixing it up today. It worked out. Like with KRE, we want to make it into a nice place, and we want to welcome everyone there. Now, I've been associated with a lot of nonprofits. You might say my entire life has been nonprofit. CHRS, the staff, the organization, the officers, the board, the volunteers, really one of the best I've known. But there's really only one leader, one person who has stood tall during this remarkable era, and that is what I call him our president for life, Steve Cushman. He puts the needs of others ahead of himself. He is upbeat. He's always on two phones at the same time. He guides the ship of old radio. Now, when it was our darkest hour, and when we were evicted from KRE by a new owner, just like that, here was Steve, who believed in our cause. He had hope and he had contacts. He was willing to talk to all of our original pledgers and say, are you still in for this new building? Of course, they said yes. And Steve also has, just to introduce him, he has one very good collection of assets that you need in an organization like ours. He is willing to bridge, and he understands the great varieties of the communities that we serve. We serve the technical geek, we serve the DJ, the ham operator, the communications researcher writer, the broadcast station owner, the news anchor, the professor, and the engineer. So I give you my friend and a friend of old radio, Steve Cushman.
I'm sort of flabbergasted at the moment. This is totally unexpected, and we would have gotten out of here on time. But radio has always been my passion, even though I've spent 44 years now in the pit of television. Radio has always been my passion, and I think what we do is very important to our culture and is very important to our history. We are the West Coast Center for all things radio, and we are the place where radio and radio history will be preserved forever. And thanks to all of you, thanks to all of our members, thanks to everyone that we've received support from over the years to make this happen. Again, I am blown away. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a great time going home.
Did you know that I no longer work for Clear Channel? It's now iHeart. And when you look at our website, please don't think that we are a cardiac care unit. Just another change in the wonderful world of radio. So many great stories here today, so many wonderful historic moments, so many things that the passion that comes out. It's a wonderful day to be a part of. Does anybody else need anything? Are we wrapping up? Peter's got another 2-hour and 45-minute documentary that he's going to show you about KREEM, whatever it is. So, anyway, I've enjoyed this. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
There's one person here I really want to say hello to because we haven't seen him in a long time. Hank Greenwald. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Okay, thanks for joining us today, folks. Don't forget the holiday party, the Legends holiday party, will be here in this very room, December 10th. Elvis will be here. Holiday party without Elvis. But also Abe Batat, who's here today, and Noah Griffin, along with a few surprises. Wednesday, December 10th, right here at Springer's.